My name is Deborah Moore, but everyone calls me Deb. I'm 58 years old, and this is the story of how my own son Marcus decided I didn't deserve financial security in my golden years, so I made sure he wouldn't get a single penny of what I'd spent decades building. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Have you ever had someone you raised, someone you sacrificed everything for, look you dead in the eye and tell you that your struggles don't matter, that your needs are somehow less important than their wants? Well, that's exactly what happened to me, and what I did about it will probably shock you. The morning that changed everything started like any other Tuesday in my small apartment in Cedar Falls, Iowa. I was sitting at my kitchen table, surrounded by bills and bank statements, trying to figure out how I was going to make my medication payments stretch until my next Social Security check. The arthritis in my hands made it painful to hold the pen, but I kept writing, kept calculating, kept hoping the numbers would somehow add up differently this time. I'd been living in this modest 2-bedroom apartment for 3 years now, ever since I'd downsized from the 4-bedroom house where I'd raised Marcus and his sister Elena. The house had been my pride and joy, the place where I'd hosted every birthday party, every holiday dinner, every milestone celebration, but after my husband Frank passed away 5 years ago, the upkeep had become too much for my widow's budget, and the memories had become too heavy for my heart. The apartment was clean but sparse. I'd kept only the essentials when I moved, selling most of my furniture to help cover Frank's medical bills that insurance wouldn't touch. The walls were bare, except for a few family photos, including one of Marcus graduating from law school that I'd paid for entirely out of my own savings. He'd been so proud that day, so grateful. He'd hugged me tight and whispered, "Mom, I'm going to make sure you never have to worry about money again." That promise felt like a lifetime ago as I stared at the electric bill in my hands. $73. Not much to most people, but when you're living on $1,200 a month from Social Security, every dollar matters. I'd already cut back on groceries, buying generic brands, and skipping meals some days. I'd canceled my cable, kept the thermostat at 65 even when my bones ached from the cold, and hadn't bought new clothes in over 2 years. My phone buzzed with a text message, and my heart lifted when I saw Marcus's name on the screen. He lived about 40 minutes away in Des Moines, in a beautiful colonial house with his wife Jennifer, and their 2 kids. He was doing well as a corporate lawyer, making more money than Frank and I had ever dreamed of. Surely he'd understand if I asked for a little help with this month's bill. I called him immediately, my hands trembling slightly as I dialed. He answered on the 3rd ring, and I could hear the sounds of his busy office in the background. "Hey Mom, what's up? I'm actually in between meetings, so I can't talk long." "I know, sweetheart. I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing." "How are the kids?" "They're great. Busy with soccer and piano lessons. Jennifer's got them scheduled within an inch of their lives." He laughed, but it sounded distracted. "Listen, Mom, I really do need to." "Marcus, honey, I hate to ask, but I'm having a tough month financially. The electric bill came in higher than expected, and with my medication costs, I'm just a little short. Could you maybe help me out with $75? I'll pay you back as soon as my next check comes in." The silence on the other end of the line stretched longer than it should have. When Marcus finally spoke, his tone had shifted from hurried to something colder. "Mom, we've talked about this. You need to learn to budget better. Jennifer and I have our own expenses. The kids' activities alone cost us hundreds every month, not to mention the mortgage, car payments, Jennifer's shopping. We can't keep bailing you out every time you overspend." My chest tightened. Overspend? I hadn't bought anything for myself in months. "Marcus, I'm not overspending. I'm barely spending anything at all. I just need help with basic utilities." "Look, you chose to move into that apartment. You chose to keep living beyond your means, instead of finding something even cheaper. These are consequences of your decisions, and Jennifer and I agreed that we can't keep enabling this behavior." Enabling? The word hit me like a slap. I thought about all the times I'd enabled him, the law school tuition I'd paid by liquidating my retirement fund, the down payment on his first car that had cost me 3 months of overtime at the factory, the wedding expenses I'd covered when Jennifer's parents suddenly couldn't contribute as much as they'd promised. "I'm not asking you to bail me out. I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm asking my son for help with a $75 electric bill. And I'm telling you that you need to figure it out yourself. Mom, you're not our responsibility, you're an adult, and adults handle their own problems. I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, wondering when the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms had become this stranger. Marcus, I worked 2 jobs for 15 years to put you through school. I never once told you to figure it out yourself. That was your choice, he said, and his voice was getting irritated now. Nobody asked you to do that. You made sacrifices because you wanted to, not because you had to, and now you're trying to guilt trip me into paying for your poor planning. Poor plan, as if getting arthritis was poor planning, as if Frank getting cancer was poor planning, as if the factory closing down and eliminating my pension was poor planning. You know what, Marcus? You're right, I did choose to sacrifice for you. I chose to work double shifts so you could have new clothes for school. I chose to eat peanut butter sandwiches for dinner, so you could have money for your class trips. I chose to give up my dreams of going back to school so I could pay for your. And you're absolutely right. Nobody asked me to do that. Exactly. So don't expect me to. I'm not finished. The words came out harder than I'd intended, but I didn't soften them. You want to talk about choices. Here's another choice I'm making. I'm changing my will. Another silence. But this one felt different. Sharper. What do you mean? I mean that if I'm not your responsibility now, then you're not my beneficiary later. I've got about $80,000 in life insurance. Plus this apartment will sell for something. And there's my small savings account. I was planning to leave it all to you and Elena. But since you've made it clear that mother doesn't need money, I guess son doesn't need an inheritance. Mom, don't be ridiculous. You're being dramatic over $75. I'm not being dramatic. I'm being practical. You just told me that my financial problems are my responsibility alone. Well, my money is my responsibility too. And I'm responsible enough to make sure it goes to someone who actually cares whether I can keep my lights on. I could hear Marcus breathing on the other end. Could almost feel him recalculating. Look, if it's really that important, I can probably. No, the word came out firm and fine. You were right the first time. I need to handle my own problems, and this is how I'm handling them. I hung up before he could respond, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the electric bill, then slowly reached for my laptop. I'd bought it used 3 years ago, and it took forever to boot up. But I needed to do some research. I spent the rest of the morning looking up estate planning attorneys in Cedar Falls. There weren't many, but I found one with good reviews who offered free consultation. I called and made an appointment for the following week, then sat back in my chair and took a deep breath. The phone rang almost immediately. Marcus, I let it go to voicemail. It rang again 5 minutes later, then again. By noon I had 7 missed calls and 3 voicemails. I didn't listen to any of them. Instead, I called my daughter Elena in Portland. She was 4 years younger than Marcus, worked as a nurse, and had always been more practical about money than her brother. When she answered, I could hear her twins chattering in the background. Mom, perfect timing. I just got the kids down for quiet time. How are you doing? I'm okay, honey. How are my grandbabies? They're 4, Mom. So they're exhausting and wonderful and driving me slightly insane. She laughed and the sound of it warmed something in my chest that had gone cold during the conversation with Marcus. Actually, I've been meaning to call you. Tom got a bonus at work last month, and we wanted to send you a little something to help with Bill. I know things have been tight since Dad passed. I closed my eyes, feeling tears prick at the corners. Elena, sweetheart, that's incredibly generous, but you don't need to. Mom, stop. You sent me care packages all through nursing school. You babysat the twins every weekend for a year when Tom and I were trying to get back on our feet financially. You've never asked us for anything, but that doesn't mean we can't offer. The contrast between my 2 children was so stark it almost made me laugh. Almost. Actually, honey, something happened today that I need to tell you about. I told her about the conversation with Marcus, about his refusal to help and his dismissive attitude. I told her about my decision to change my will. Elena listened without interrupting, making small sounds of sympathy and outrage, in all the right places. Mom, Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. I'm so sorry he talked to you like that. That's not the Marcus I know, it's the Marcus I'm getting to know, I said quietly, and I don't like him very much. What exactly are you planning to do about the will? I took a breath. I'm going to leave everything to you, Elena, and maybe set up a small fund for the twins' education. Marcus made it clear that he doesn't think I'm his responsibility, so I'm making it clear that my money isn't his windfall. Elena was quiet for a moment. Mom, are you sure about this? I mean, I'm grateful, but Marcus is still your son. Maybe he was just having a bad day, or maybe Jennifer was. Elena, this wasn't about Jennifer. This was about Marcus looking at his mother struggling to pay a $75 electric bill, and telling her that her poor planning wasn't his problem. This was about him forgetting every sacrifice I made to get him where he is today. Have you told him about your decision? I told him I was changing my will. He's called 7 times since then, but I haven't answered. Maybe you should hear him out. Maybe he realizes he made a mistake. I looked at the electric bill still sitting on my kitchen table, then at the stack of medical bills next to it, then at the notice from my prescription company about increasing copays. You know what, sweetheart? Maybe I will answer his call, but not because I'm hoping for an apology, because I want him to understand exactly what he's lost. After I hung up with Elena, I sat in my quiet apartment and thought about the conversation with Marcus. The more I replayed it, the angrier I became, not just at his refusal to help, but at his attitude, the condescension, the way he'd made me feel like I was begging for charity instead of asking my successful son for help with basic survival. I thought about Jennifer too. Marcus had mentioned that she'd agreed they couldn't keep enabling me. Keep enabling me? When had they ever helped me before? I'd asked Marcus for money exactly twice since Frank died, once when my car broke down and I needed $800 for repairs, and once last year when I'd had to choose between my heart medication and my rent. Both times, he'd helped, but both times he'd made me feel like I was imposing. Apparently asking for help with utilities was where he drew the line. My phone buzzed with a text message. Marcus again. Mom, please call me back. I think there was a misunderstanding. Let's talk about this rationally, as if I'd been irrational for being hurt by his dismissal. I typed back, there was no misunderstanding. You were very clear about your position. I'm being equally clear about mine. His response came immediately. You're overreacting. It's $75. I'll send you the money if it's that important. I stared at the message, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. He still didn't get it. He thought this was about the money. He thought he could fix this by throwing cash at the problem he'd created. I typed back, this was never about $75. This was about whether my son cares, if his mother can keep her lights on. You answered that question clearly. Mom, of course I care. You're being dramatic. Dramatic. There was that word again, the same word Frank used to use when I tried to tell him his drinking was affecting our family. The same word Marcus had used in high school, when I'd confronted him about failing grades. It was a word designed to dismiss, to minimize, to make the other person feel foolish for having feelings. I turned off my phone. The next few days passed in a strange kind of peace. I paid the electric bill using money I'd set aside for groceries, then walked to the food bank downtown to supplement what I could afford at the store. It wasn't the first time I'd had to do this since Frank died, but it was the first time I'd done it knowing my son thought my financial struggles were evidence of poor planning, rather than unfortunate circumstances. I met with the estate planning attorney, a kind woman named Patricia Hernandez, who listened to my story without judgment. She explained my options, helped me understand the legal implications of my decision, and never once suggested that I was being hasty or dramatic. Miss Moore, she said as we finished the paperwork, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've seen a lot of family situations. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is set boundaries, even if those boundaries are uncomfortable for everyone involved. I liked Patricia. She reminded me of Elena, practical but compassionate. On Friday, exactly 1 week after my conversation with Marcus, He showed up at my apartment unannounced. I heard his car in the parking lot and watched from my window as he sat there for several minutes before getting out. He looked tired, older somehow, and for a moment I felt a pang of sympathy for him. Then I remembered his voice on the phone, cold and dismissive, and the sympathy faded. He knocked softly, and I waited a moment before opening the door. He stood there with a bouquet of grocery store flowers and an envelope in his hand, looking uncomfortable. "Hi, Mom. Marcus, can I come in? I think we need to talk." I stepped aside and let him into my small living room. He looked around, and I wondered if he was really seeing it for the first time. The second-hand furniture, the bare walls, the careful way I'd arranged everything to make the space feel larger than it was. "Mom, I brought you something." He held out the envelope. "It's a check for $500. I want to help with your bills." I didn't take the envelope. "Is that supposed to fix this? I'm trying to show you that I care about your situation. I'm sorry if I came across as uncaring on the phone." I was stressed about work, and I didn't handle the conversation well. I sat down on my couch, and after a moment, he sat across from me in the chair I'd bought at a thrift store for $15. "Marcus, do you remember when you were 8 years old and you wanted that expensive bike for your birthday? The red one with all the gears?" He frowned, clearly not expecting the conversation to go in this direction. "Vaguely. Why? It cost $250. Do you know how I afforded it?" "Mom, I don't see what this has to do with." "I worked extra shifts at the factory for 6 weeks. I picked up weekend work cleaning offices. I sold my grandmother's ring, the one I'd been planning to give to Elena someday. I did all of that because I wanted to see your face light up on your birthday morning." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "I appreciate everything you did for me growing up. You were a great mother." "Were," past tense. "That's not what I meant, isn't?" "Because last week, when I called you for help with a $75 electric bill, you told me that my problems weren't your responsibility. You told me I was overspending, and that I needed to learn to budget better. I was having a bad day. Work has been stressful, and Jennifer's been on me about our own expenses." "Marcus, I haven't bought new clothes in 2 years. I eat 1 meal a day half the time so I can afford my medications. I keep my thermostat at 65 degrees, even when my arthritis is screaming. What exactly am I overspending on?" He was quiet for a moment, staring at his hands. "I didn't realize it was that bad." "You didn't realize it because you didn't want to know. It's easier to assume I'm being irresponsible than to face the fact that your mother is struggling. So what do you want from me?" "I'm here. I brought money. I'm apologizing." I looked at him, this successful man in his expensive suit, sitting in my threadbare chair, and realized that he still didn't understand. He thought this was a transaction. He thought he could buy his way back into my will with $500 and a grocery store bouquet. "I want you to understand something, Marcus. When I decided to change my will, it wasn't a negotiating tactic. It wasn't meant to punish you or teach you a lesson. It was me accepting the reality of our relationship." "What reality?" "The reality that you see me as a burden, rather than your mother. The reality that you think my needs are less important than your wants. The reality that you've forgotten every sacrifice I made to help you become the man you are today." Marcus set the envelope on my coffee table and leaned forward. "Mom, I don't see you as a burden. I love you, but I also have responsibilities to my own family. I'm not asking you to choose between me and your family. I'm asking you to remember that I'm part of your family too." He was quiet for a long moment, and I could see him struggling with something. Finally he said, "Jennifer thinks you're manipulative. She thinks you ask for money because you know I feel guilty about Dad's medical bills and the house." There it was, the truth, finally. "And what do you think, Marcus?" I think maybe I've been listening to Jennifer more than I should have been." I nodded slowly. "Your wife doesn't like me. That's not news. But you're not married to your wife's opinion of your mother. You're supposed to form your own. It's not that simple." "It's exactly that simple. Last week you had a choice. You could have said, 'Mom, I'm sorry you're struggling. Let me help you with that bill.' Instead, you chose to lecture me about budgeting and tell me that my problems weren't your responsibility." Marcus picked up the envelope and held it out to me again. "Can't we just move past this? I'm trying to make it right. I didn't take the money." "Tell me something, Marcus. If Jennifer needed $75 for something, would you give it to her? That's different. How? She's my wife, and I'm your mother. The woman who gave up her own dreams so you could pursue yours. The woman who worked 2 jobs so you wouldn't have to take out student loans. The woman who emptied her retirement account to pay for your law school. I never asked you to do any of that. And there it was again, the same response he'd given me on the phone, as if my love and sacrifice had been unwanted impositions, rather than gifts freely given. I stood up. You're right, Marcus. You never asked me to sacrifice for you, just like I'm not asking you to sacrifice for me. I'm simply asking you to care enough about my well-being to help me keep my electricity on, and I'm here doing exactly that. No, you're here trying to buy your way back into my will. There's a difference. Marcus stood up too, his face flushing. So what now? You're going to cut me out of your will over one conversation, over $75. I'm going to respect your clearly stated boundaries. You said I'm not your responsibility. Fine, then my money isn't your inheritance. Mom, that's not fair. Fair. I felt a laugh building in my chest, but it wasn't a happy sound. Marcus, I've been eating peanut butter sandwiches for dinner so I can afford my heart medication, and you think it's unfair that I'm changing my will. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I remembered from his childhood, when he was frustrated. What do you want from me? Do you want me to support you financially for the rest of your life? I want you to act like you love me more than you resent the possibility of being inconvenienced by my needs. The words hung in the air between us, and I could see them hit him like a physical blow. His face went pale, and for a moment, he looked like the little boy who used to apologize for breaking my favorite vase. Mom, I do love you. I know you do, Marcus, but you don't like me very much anymore, and you definitely don't respect me. That's not true, isn't it? When was the last time you called me just to see how I was doing? When was the last time you invited me to dinner at your house? When was the last time you asked about my life, instead of waiting for me to ask about yours? He was quiet, and I could see him thinking, trying to remember. I'm busy, Mom. Work is demanding. The kids have activities. Jennifer has her projects. Everyone's busy, Marcus, but people make time for the things that matter to them. I walked to my small kitchen and put the kettle on. My hands were shaking slightly, but I kept them busy preparing tea. Marcus followed me, the envelope still in his hand. Mom, please don't do this. Don't let one bad conversation destroy our relationship. I turned to face him. Marcus, this conversation didn't destroy our relationship. It revealed what our relationship actually is. And what's that? You see me as an obligation, a responsibility you didn't ask for and don't particularly want, someone who occasionally needs things from you that you'd rather not provide. That's not how I see it. Then why, when I called you last week scared about not being able to pay my electric bill, was your first response to lecture me about budgeting instead of asking if I was okay? He didn't have an answer for that. The kettle whistled, and I poured hot water over tea bags in 2 mismatched mugs. I'd sold my good china set 2 years ago to help pay for Frank's funeral. Marcus, I'm 58 years old, I've got arthritis, high blood pressure and a heart condition. I'm living on Social Security and whatever I can make from the part-time work my body can still handle. I'm not asking you to support me lavishly, I'm asking you to care enough to help me survive. I do care. Then why did it take me threatening to change my will for you to show up here with help? He set the envelope on my kitchen counter and took the mug of tea I offered him. Because I'm an idiot. Because I let Jennifer convince me that helping you would somehow hurt our own family's financial stability. Because I forgot that you're the reason I have financial stability in the first place. It was the first real acknowledgement he'd made, and I felt something in my chest loosen slightly. Marcus, I don't want your money to buy my forgiveness. I want your genuine concern for my well-being. I want to feel like I matter to you as more than just an inheritance to protect. You do matter to me. Then prove it. Not with money, with time, with attention, with the same care you'd show if Jennifer was struggling. He was quiet for a long moment, sipping his tea and staring out my small kitchen window. Finally, he said, I think I've been so focused on protecting my own family's financial future that I forgot my mother was part of that family too. I don't want to be a burden on you, Marcus. I never wanted that. But I also don't want to be invisible until I die and leave you money. You're not invisible. Aren't I? When was the last time you called me just to talk? When was the last time you asked me to spend time with your children? When was the last time you treated me like a person you actually enjoy being around instead of an obligation you have to manage? The questions hung in the air and I could see him struggling with the answers. Or the lack of answers. I can do better, he said finally. I want to do better. I hope so, Marcus. But even if you do, I'm still changing my will. His face fell. Why? If I'm promising to be a better son, why are you still punishing me? I'm not punishing you. I'm protecting myself. From spending the rest of my life wondering if your kindness is genuine or just an investment in your inheritance. Marcus set down his mug and stared at me. You really think I'm that shallow? I think you're human, and I think humans are capable of rationalizing almost anything when money is involved. I don't want to wonder if you're helping me because you love me, or because you're protecting your financial future. So you're cutting me out completely. I'm leaving everything to Elena and setting up education funds for your children and hers. You'll still benefit. Just not directly. That's not the same thing. No, it's not. It's better. This way, when you call me or visit me or help me, I'll know it's because you want to. Not because you're hoping to inherit something. Marcus was quiet for a long time, processing this. Finally, he asked, what if I prove to you that I can be better? What if I show you that I can care about your well-being without thinking about money? Would you consider changing the will back? I looked at my son, this successful man who had forgotten where he came from, and felt a mixture of love and sadness that nearly overwhelmed me. Marcus, if you prove to me that you can be the son I raised you to be, then whether or not you inherit my money won't matter to either of us. He nodded slowly, understanding finally dawning in his eyes. I have a lot to think about, he said. Yes, you do. He hugged me before he left, and for the first time in years, it felt genuine. Not obligatory, not guilty, just the embrace of a son who was finally seeing his mother clearly. After he left, I sat in my quiet apartment and realized that something had shifted, not just in my relationship with Marcus, but in how I saw myself. For the first time since Frank died, I didn't feel like a burden or a victim, or someone waiting to be rescued. I felt like a woman who knew her worth and wasn't afraid to protect it. The envelope Marcus had left sat on my counter, untouched. $500 that was meant to buy forgiveness, to restore his place in my will, to make everything go back to the way it was. I left it there for 3 days, thinking. Then I wrote him a check for the same amount and mailed it back with a note. This is not about money. This is about love. When you understand the difference, we can have a real conversation about our relationship. 2 weeks later, Marcus called, not to argue about the will, not to negotiate, but to ask how I was feeling and whether I needed anything. He invited me to dinner at his house the following weekend and asked if there were any foods I couldn't eat because of my medications. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a beginning. I went to dinner, and for the first time in years, Jennifer was actually pleasant to me. She asked about my health, complimented my dress, and even suggested that Marcus and I should have lunch together regularly to catch up. I suspected Marcus had told her about the will change, and her sudden warmth felt calculated. But Marcus's attention felt different, more present, more genuine. After dinner, he walked me to my car and said, Mom, I've been thinking about what you said. About me not calling just to talk, not spending time with you unless I needed something. You were right. I'm glad you can see that. I want to change that. I want to be better. Not because of the will, but because I love you and I've been taking you for granted. I'd like that, Mark, but I also want you to know that I understand why you changed the will, and I respect your decision, even if I become the perfect son from now on. You don't owe me anything. You've already given me everything I needed to build my own life. I hugged him then, and it felt like hugging the boy I'd raised, the one who understood that love was about giving, not taking. Over the next few months, Marcus kept his word. He called me twice a week, just to check in. He invited me to his children's soccer games and piano recital. He helped me find a better health insurance plan, and drove me to doctor's appointments when I needed someone to advocate for me with the medical staff. Most importantly, he never once mentioned the will, or asked me to reconsider my decision. Elena visited for Christmas that year, bringing her twins and her husband Tom. We had dinner at Marcus's house, and for the first time in years it felt like a real family gathering. The kids played together, the adults talked and laughed, and I felt like I belonged instead of like I was being tolerated. After everyone else had gone to bed, Marcus and I sat in his living room, drinking coffee and talking about everything and nothing. Finally he said, "Mom, I need to thank you." "For what?" "For changing your will, for showing me what I was becoming, for caring enough about our relationship to fight for it instead of just accepting that we'd grown apart." "You don't need to thank me for protecting myself, Marcus." "Yes, I do. Because in protecting yourself, you saved our relationship. If you hadn't forced me to confront how I was treating you, I would have kept taking you for granted until it was too late." I reached over and took his hand. "You're a good man, Mark. You just forgot for a while. Who taught you how to be good?" "I'll never forget again." 6 months later, I was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer. The treatment was expensive and exhausting, but I wasn't alone. Marcus drove me to every chemotherapy appointment. Elena flew in from Portland to stay with me during the worst weeks. Even Jennifer brought me homemade soup and sat with me when I was too sick to be alone. Through it all, Marcus never once mentioned the will or suggested that my medical expenses were depleting his potential inheritance. He just showed up, day after day, being the son I'd always known he could be. When I finished treatment and got the news that the cancer was in remission, Marcus took me out to celebrate. Over dinner he said, "Mom, I have something to tell you." "What's that?" "I've been putting money aside every month since our conversation about the will, not for me, but for you, for your medical expenses, for home repairs, for anything you might need. I don't want you ever to feel like you can't call me for help." I felt tears prick at my eye. "Marcus, that's incredibly generous, but it's not generosity. It's responsibility. Not obligation, responsibility. There's a difference." "What's the difference?" "Obligation is something you resent. Responsibility is something you embrace, because it comes from love." I smiled at him, this man who had finally learned the lessons I'd been trying to teach him his whole life. "I'm proud of you," I said. "I'm proud of you too, Mom, for not letting me get away with being less than the man you raised me to be." A year later, I revised my will again, not because Marcus had asked me to, but because he'd proven that he understood the difference between loving someone and using someone. I split my estate equally between my 2 children, but I also included a letter explaining my decision. "To my son Marcus," I wrote, "I am leaving you half of my estate, not because you are entitled to it, but because you have earned it. You learned that love is not about what you can get from someone, but about what you can give. You learned that family is not about obligation, but about choice. You chose to be my son in the truest sense of the word, and for that, I am grateful." I sealed the letter with my will and gave copies to Patricia Hernandez, my attorney. Then I went home to my small apartment, made myself a cup of tea, and sat in my favorite chair, reading a book. Elena had sent me. My phone rang, and Marcus's name appeared on the screen. "Hi, sweetheart," I answered. "Hi, Mom. I was just calling to see how you're feeling today. Any side effects from the new medication?" "No, I'm feeling good. How are you?" "I'm well. Listen, Jennifer and I were talking, and we'd like you to come stay with us for a few weeks this summer. The kids would love to spend more time with their grandmother, and honestly, so would we." "I'd like that very much." "Great. I'll call you this weekend and we can plan the details." "I love you, Mom." "I love you too, Marcus." After I hung up, I sat in my quiet apartment and smiled. My son had said he loved me, and for the first time in years I believed him completely. The summer visit turned out to be more revealing than I had anticipated. Living in Marcus and Jennifer's house for 3 weeks gave me a front row seat to the dynamics I had only glimpsed during brief holiday visits. What I discovered made me realize that changing my will had been just the beginning of the changes I needed to make in my life. The first morning I woke up in their guest room, I could hear Jennifer on the phone with someone, her voice carrying through the thin wall. She was complaining about having to adjust their vacation plans, because Marcus's mother is staying with us for most of July. She didn't say it with malice exactly, just with the kind of resigned frustration you might use when discussing a leaky roof or a broken appliance. Something inconvenient that had to be dealt with. I lay in bed listening to her explain to whoever was on the other end of the line that they would have to postpone their trip to Martha's Vineyard because Marcus felt obligated to spend time with me after my cancer treatment. Obligated, not because he wanted to reconnect with his mother, but because he felt he had to. When I came downstairs for breakfast, Jennifer was all smiles and pleasant conversation, asking if I'd slept well, and offering to make me eggs. But I had heard what I'd heard, and it colored everything that followed. Marcus left for work early, kissing Jennifer goodbye, and squeezing my shoulder as he passed. "Have a good day, Mom. Jennifer's going to show you around the neighborhood." After he left, Jennifer poured herself another cup of coffee and sat across from me at their granite kitchen island. The house was beautiful, I had to admit. Open floor plan, stainless steel appliances, hardwood floors throughout. It was the kind of house I'd dreamed of when Marcus was little, the kind of place where holidays would be warm and welcoming and full of laughter. "So Deb," Jennifer said, and I noticed she'd never called me anything but my first name, never Mom or any variation of it. "Marcus mentioned that you're thinking about maybe moving closer to us. I think that's a wonderful idea." I hadn't mentioned any such thing, but I nodded, and waited to see where this was going. "There's a really nice senior living community about 20 minutes from here. Very affordable, lots of activities, shuttle service to shopping center." I actually picked up some brochures when Marcus told me you might be interested. She slid a stack of glossy pamphlets across the counter to me: Sunset Manor, Golden Years, Villa, Peaceful Pines, Retirement Community. I flipped through them, noting the emphasis on maintenance-free living and age-appropriate social activities. "These look lovely," I said carefully, though I have to say I hadn't really thought about moving. "I'm comfortable in my apartment, and Cedar Falls is home." Jennifer's smile flickered just slightly. "Oh, but wouldn't it be nice to be closer to the grandchildren? And Marcus worries about you living alone, especially after the cancer scare." Jennifer worries about Marcus worrying, which amounts to the same thing from her perspective. "That's thoughtful of him," I said, setting the brochures aside. "But I'm managing fine on my own." "Of course you are. I didn't mean to imply otherwise. It's just that these places offer so many benefits. Medical care on site, social activities with people your own age, no more worrying about home maintenance or cooking for yourself all the time. People my own age." As if 58 was ancient, as if I needed to be warehoused with other elderly people for my own good and everyone else's convenience. "Jennifer, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you see me as a burden on your family?" Her coffee cup paused halfway to her lips, and I saw her calculating how to answer. "Deb, that's a strange question. You're Marcus's mother. Family is never a burden." It was a politician's answer, technically correct, but completely empty of meaning. "That's not what I asked." She set down her cup and looked at me directly for the first time since Marcus had left. "I think Marcus feels a lot of guilt about your situation, about the money, about your health, about the fact that you're living alone. And that guilt affects our family planning, our financial decisions, our time management. So while I would never call you a burden, I do think it would be better for everyone if you had more support systems in place that didn't revolve around Marcus." There it was, honest at least, even if it was also cold as ice. "I see, and you think moving me into a senior living facility would solve that problem?" "I think it would give Marcus peace of mind, which would make our marriage stronger, which would be better for the children." I had to admire her directness, even as it stung. She wasn't pretending this was about my well-being. She was being clear that this was about removing me as a complication in her nuclear family. "Jennifer, I appreciate your honesty, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm not trying to push you out, Deb. I'm trying to find a solution that works for everyone. The solution that works for me is staying in my own home, maintaining my independence, and having a relationship with my son that doesn't require your management." Her pleasant mask slipped completely then. "You can't expect Marcus to drop everything every time you need something. He has responsibilities. I expect Marcus to make his own decisions about what he can and can't do for his mother. I don't expect his wife to make those decisions for him. I'm protecting my family, From what? From Marcus's mother occasionally needing help with medical appointments or bills. From Marcus feeling so guilty about your situation that he can't focus on his own family's needs. And there it was, the real issue. Not that I was actually taking anything away from Marcus's family, but that my existence reminded him that he had obligations beyond his wife and children. That made Jennifer uncomfortable because it meant she couldn't control every aspect of their family dynamic. I spent the rest of that day walking around their neighborhood, thinking about the conversation: beautiful houses, perfectly manicured lawns, the kind of suburban paradise that looked idyllic from the outside, but could feel suffocating if you looked too closely. When Marcus came home from work, he found me sitting on their back deck reading one of the senior living brochures Jennifer had given me. "Mom, what do you think?" Jennifer said. "She showed you some options for moving closer to us." I looked at my son, this successful man who loved me, but was also clearly influenced by his wife's desire to manage me out of their lives. "Marcus, sit down. We need to talk." He settled into the chair next to mine, loosening his tie. He looked tired, older than his 34 years. "Do you want me to move into one of these places? I want you to be happy and safe, and close enough that I can help you when you need it." "That's not what I asked." He was quiet for a moment, staring out at their perfectly landscaped yard. "I worry about you living alone, especially after the cancer. What if something happens and no one finds you for days? What if something happens to you? What if you have a heart attack at work? What if Jennifer gets in a car accident?" We could play the what if game forever, Marcus, but it doesn't change the fact that life involves risk. It's different for someone your age. I'm 58, not 88, and I'm in remission. I'm not dying. I know that, but these places offer security, community, activity. "Marcus, do you remember when you were 16 and you wanted to go to that summer camp in Colorado, the expensive one that would have cost us 3 months of mortgage payments?" "Vaguely. What does that have to do with anything?" "Do you remember what I told you when you asked if we could afford it?" He shook his head. "I told you that we would find a way because your happiness and growth were more important than our comfort. I took on extra shifts. Your father picked up weekend work, and we sent you to that camp because we believed in your right to make your own choices about your life. I appreciate everything you and Dad did for me. Then extend me the same courtesy. Trust that I know what's best for my own life." Marcus was quiet for a long time. Finally he said, "Jennifer thinks it would be better for our marriage if you were settled somewhere with more support. And what do you think?" "I think Jennifer has valid concerns about the stress your situation puts on our family." "What stress, specifically?" "The worry, the guilt, the feeling that I should be doing more to help you but not knowing what the right amount of help is." I could see Jennifer's influence in his words, her way of framing the issue as being about his feelings, rather than about my actual need. "Marcus, when I call you for help, do I ask for more than you can reasonably give?" "No. When I visit, do I overstay my welcome, or create problems in your household?" "No. When you offer to help me, do I take advantage, or ask for more than you've offered?" "No." "Then what exactly is the stress you're referring to?" He ran his hands through his hair, that old gesture of frustration. "The stress of knowing that you're struggling financially, and not being sure how much I should help. The stress of worrying about your health when you're living alone. The stress of feeling like I'm not doing enough, but also feeling like Jennifer is right, that we need to protect our own family's financial future." "Marcus, look at me." He turned to face me directly. "I am not asking you to sacrifice your family's future for me. I am not asking you to support me financially, beyond helping with occasional emergencies. I am not asking you to solve all my problems, or take responsibility for my happiness. I am asking you to let me live my own life, and make my own choices, even if they're not the choices you or Jennifer would make." "But what if you make the wrong choice? What if you hurt yourself or get sick again, and there's no one there to help?" "Then I'll deal with the consequences of my choices, just like you deal with the consequences of yours." "That's not fair." "What's not fair about it?" "Because if something happens to you, I'll feel responsible." "Why?" "Because you're my mother, and Jennifer is your wife, and your children are your responsibility, and you have a demanding job, and you have your own health to worry about, and you have a mortgage, and car payments, and all the other obligations of adult life. But somehow, You think you're also responsible for managing my life. I'm responsible for caring about what happens to you. Caring about what happens to me, and controlling what happens to me, are two different things. Marcus was quiet again, processing. In the distance I could hear Jennifer inside the house, talking to the children about homework, and piano practice, and all the normal rhythms of family life. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course. Are you happy living alone? Really happy, not just putting on a brave face. I thought about my small apartment, my quiet mornings with tea and a book, my part-time job at the thrift store, my friendship with my neighbor Mrs. Chen, who brought me soup when I was sick, and let me borrow her car when mine was in the shop. I'm content, Marcus. I have my health, my independence, my small routines and pleasures. I miss your father every day, and I miss the version of you that used to call me, just to tell me about something funny that happened at work. But overall, yes, I'm happy, and you don't want to be around people your own age more. People who understand what you're going through. What am I going through that requires special understanding? Being widowed, being on a fixed income, dealing with health issues. Marcus, the woman who cuts my hair, is widowed. The man who fixes my car is on disability and struggling financially. My neighbor is dealing with diabetes and arthritis. I don't need to move into a special facility to find people who understand life's challenges. But wouldn't it be easier if you had built-in support, activities, meals provided, medical care on site? Easier for whom? That stopped him short. Easier for me, or easier for you and Jennifer? Both. Marcus, I lived through your father's cancer, his death, losing my job when the factory closed, selling the house, moving into a smaller place, adjusting to life on Social Security, and then my own cancer diagnosis and treatment. I've proven that I can handle difficult situations. Why are you suddenly convinced that I need to be managed and monitored? Because I love you, and I don't want anything bad to happen to you. And I love you too, but love doesn't mean wrapping someone in bubble wrap. Sometimes, love means trusting people to live their own lives, even when those lives involve risk and uncertainty. So you won't even consider moving closer to us, not into a senior living facility. No, if I ever decide to move, it will be to a place of my own choosing, for my own reason. Marcus nodded slowly. I guess I can understand that. Can you, or are you just saying that because you know I won't change my mind? I can understand it. I don't like it, but I can understand it. That's all I can ask for. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun set over their perfectly maintained yard. Finally, Marcus said, I should probably go help Jennifer with dinner. Marcus, one more thing. Yeah, when you discuss me with Jennifer, remember that I'm your mother, not a problem to be solved. I know that. Do you? Because sometimes it feels like you and Jennifer talk about me the way you might talk about an aging pet. What to do with me, where to put me, how to manage the inconvenience I represent. That's not how we talk about you, isn't it? Jennifer told me this morning that Marcus feels obligated to spend time with me. Is that how you described this visit to her? Marcus's face flushed. I may have expressed some concerns about balancing family time with taking care of you, taking care of me, as if I'm an invalid or a child. I didn't mean it that way. How did you mean it? I meant making sure you're okay, spending time with you, being available if you need help, all of which are normal parts of having a relationship with your parent, not special burdens that require management strategies. You're right. I'm sorry. Don't apologize to me, Mark. Just remember that I'm a person with my own thoughts, feelings, and preferences, not a responsibility to be discharged. Dinner that night was pleasant enough on the surface. Jennifer asked about my day. The children told me about their summer activities, and Marcus seemed more relaxed than he had in a while. But I could feel the undercurrent of tension, the sense that Jennifer was waiting for me to announce my decision to move into one of the facilities she'd recommended. After the children went to bed, the three of us sat in the living room with coffee. Jennifer finally brought up the subject that had been hovering over the conversation all evening. Deb, did you have a chance to think about those brochures I showed you? I did. They seem like lovely places for people who want that kind of community living. And they're not for me. Jennifer's smile became a little more forced. Can I ask why? I mean, wouldn't it be nice to have people around, activities to participate in, help when you need it?
Jennifer, I have people around.
I have activities I enjoy. I have help when I need it. But it would be so much more convenient if you were closer to us. Convenient for whom? For all of us. For you, because we could see you more often. For Marcus, because he wouldn't worry as much. For us, because we could include you in family activities more easily. I looked at Marcus, who was staring into his coffee cup like it held the secrets of the universe. Marcus, how often do you invite me to family activities now? What do you mean? I mean, when was the last time you called and said, Mom, we're having a barbecue this weekend. Would you like to come? Or Mom, we're taking the kids to the zoo. Want to join us? We invited you for Christmas. That's one invitation in 12 months. Well, there are other times. Name one. He was quiet. So you're suggesting I move closer to you so that I can be more easily included in activities you don't currently invite me to participate in. Jennifer jumped in. That's not fair. We're busy with work and the children's schedules. It's hard to coordinate. It's hard to make a phone call. It's hard to know when you're available, what you can afford to do, whether you're feeling well enough. So instead of asking me, you just don't invite me. We don't want to put pressure on you, the pressure of being invited to spend time with my son and grandchildren. The pressure of feeling like you have to say yes, even if you can't afford it or don't feel up to it. I set down my coffee cup and looked at both of them. Let me make something very clear. I am a grown woman who is perfectly capable of saying no if I can't afford something or don't feel well enough to participate. I don't need you to protect me from the burden of being invited to family events. We're just trying to be considerate. Marcus, you're trying to avoid the awkwardness of having to acknowledge that I exist on a limited budget and sometimes have health issues. It's easier to just not invite me than to deal with the possibility that I might have to decline for financial or health reasons. That's not true, Jennifer protested. Isn't it? When is the last time you invited me to something and then worked with me to make it accessible, like saying, we're going out to dinner. Would you like to join us? We'd love to treat you. We're planning a family activity. Is there anything we can do to make it easier for you to participate? Silence. You don't do that because you don't want to be in the position of having to accommodate my limitation. It's easier to just exclude me, and then tell yourselves it's for my own good. Deb, that's not fair, Jennifer said. We do consider your situation. You consider my situation as a problem to be managed, not as circumstances to be worked around because you want my company. Marcus finally looked up from his coffee. Mom, we do want your company. Do you, or do you want the idea of my company without any of the actual inconvenience of including me in your lives? What's that supposed to mean? It means you like the concept of being a good son who cares about his mother. But you don't actually want to deal with the reality of having a mother who has financial limitations and health issues, and needs occasional help. That's not true. Then why are you so eager to move me into a facility where other people will be responsible for my daily well-being, my social needs, and my care? Because we think it would be better for you. No. You think it would be easier for you. Jennifer stood up abruptly. I think I'm going to let you two work this out. I have some emails to catch up on. After she left, Marcus and I sat in uncomfortable silence for several minutes. Finally, he said, Mom, I'm sorry if we've made you feel unwanted. I don't feel unwanted. Exactly, I feel inconvenient. That's not how I see you. But it's how you treat me. You love me. But you love me at arm's length. You care about me, but you want that care to be as uncomplicated as possible. I don't know how to do this, Mom. I don't know how to balance caring for you with caring for my own family. You don't have to balance caring for me with caring for your family. I am part of your family. I know that. Do you? Because everything about this conversation suggests that you see me as separate from your real family, as an obligation rather than a relationship. Marcus was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was small. I think I'm scared. Of what? Of you getting sicker, of you falling and no one finding you, of you running out of money and having to move in with us, of Jennifer resenting the time and money we spend helping you, of the kids seeing you as a burden instead of their beloved grandmother. So you think moving me into a senior facility will solve all those fears? I think it would make some of them less likely. Marcus, all of those things could still happen even if I lived in a senior community. People get sick in nursing homes, they fall in assisted living facilities, they run out of money for monthly fees, and if your wife resents helping me and your children see me as a burden, moving me somewhere else won't change their attitude. But at least there would be staff to help you, other residents to socialize with, medical care nearby, and I would lose my independence, my community, my sense of home, and my dignity. Your dignity, the dignity that comes from making my own choices about my life, even when other people think those choices are wrong. Marcus rubbed his face with his hands. I don't know what the right answer is. The right answer is to let me live my life, and trust that I'll ask for help when I need. But what if you don't ask? What if you try to handle things on your own, that you shouldn't handle alone? Then I'll face the consequences of that decision, just like you face the consequences of your decisions. But you're my mother. Yes, and that means I love you enough to want you to live your own life without feeling responsible for managing mine. I can't just stop worrying about you. I'm not asking you to stop worrying. I'm asking you to worry about me, the way you'd worry about any adult you love, not the way you'd worry about a child who can't take care of herself. There's a difference? There's a huge difference. When you worry about Jennifer, do you try to control her choices? No. When you worry about your friends, do you suggest they move into facilities where they'll be supervised? No. Then why do you think it's appropriate to try to manage my choices? Because you're my mother, and I feel responsible for your well-being, feel responsible for loving me. Mark, let me be responsible for my well-being. We talked for another hour, covering the same ground from different angles. By the end of the conversation, I could see that Marcus understood my position, even if he didn't entirely agree with. More importantly, I could see that he was beginning to understand the difference between caring about someone and controlling someone. The next morning, Jennifer was cooler toward me, but not openly hostile. She'd clearly hoped that Marcus would convince me to consider the senior living options, and my refusal had disrupted whatever timeline she'd had in mind. Over breakfast, she tried a different approach. Deb, I hope you don't think I was trying to push you into anything yesterday. I just want what's best for everyone. I understand that, Jennifer, but what's best for me might not be what's most convenient for everyone else. Of course, I just think there are benefits to those communities that you might not have considered, such as, well, the social aspect, being around people who are in similar life situations. Jennifer, I'm 58 years old, and in good health. Most of the people in those facilities are significantly older and dealing with much more serious health and mobility issues. I'm not sure I'd have much in common with them, beyond the fact that we're all over 50, but as you get older, if and when I get to the point where I need assisted living or skilled nursing care, I'll consider those options, but I'm not there now, and I may never be. Everyone ages, Deb. Yes, and some people age in their own homes with support from family, friends, and community services. Some people stay healthy and independent well into their 80s and 90s. Moving into a senior facility isn't an inevitable part of age, but it's good to plan ahead. I am planning ahead. I have long-term care insurance, a healthcare directive, and a power of attorney. I've thought about what I'll do if my health declines or my financial situation changes. Moving into a senior facility now isn't planning ahead. It's giving up my independence prematurely. Jennifer was clearly frustrated with my responses, but she was also smart enough to recognize that she wasn't going to change my mind. Marcus came down for breakfast, looking like he hadn't slept well. He poured himself coffee and sat down at the counter without saying much. Everything okay? Jennifer asked him. Just thinking about some things Mom and I discussed last night, and I think I need to do some things differently. Jennifer's expression became guarded. What kind of things? I think I need to invite Mom to family activities more often. I think I need to ask her what she needs, instead of assuming I know what's best for her. I think I need to treat her like the independent adult she is instead of like a problem to be solved. Marcus, we've been over this. Your mother's situation creates stress for our family. No, my guilt about Mom's situation creates stress for our family. There's a difference. What's the difference? The difference is that Mom isn't actually asking for anything unreasonable. She's not demanding our time or money or attention. She's not creating drama or making unrealistic demands. She's just existing as my mother, and apparently that makes me feel guilty enough to stress about it. So what are you saying? I'm saying the problem isn't Mom. The problem is my attitude toward having a mother who sometimes needs help. Jennifer looked like she wanted to argue, but the children came running into the kitchen asking about plans for the day, and the conversation ended there. I spent the rest of my visit observing the family dynamics more carefully. Jennifer wasn't a bad person, but she was someone who needed to control her environment to feel secure. Having a mother-in-law with unpredictable needs represented chaos in her carefully ordered world. Marcus, for his part, genuinely loved me, but had been conditioned to see my needs as threats to his nuclear family's stability. He'd internalized Jennifer's anxiety about my situation and convinced himself that finding a way to manage me more efficiently was the same as caring for me better. The children, thankfully, seemed oblivious to the adult tensions. They were affectionate with me, excited to show me their rooms and their toys and their latest school projects. Spending time with them reminded me why I wanted to maintain my relationship with this family despite the complication. On my last day of the visit, Marcus drove me back to Cedar Falls. We stopped for lunch halfway there, at a little diner that reminded me of places Frank and I used to go when we were dating. Mom, I want to apologize for some things. What thing? For treating you like you're fragile or incapable, for letting Jennifer's concerns override my own judgment about what you need, for trying to solve problems you haven't asked me to solve. I appreciate that, Marcus. I also want to make you a promise. What's that? I promise to ask you what you want instead of assuming I know what's best for you. I promise to invite you to things and let you decide whether you want to participate. I promise to treat you like my mother, not like my responsibility. That sounds wonderful. And I promise to have some conversations with Jennifer about boundaries and expectations. Be gentle with her, Marcus. She's not evil, just scared of things she can't control. I know, but she needs to understand that my relationship with you isn't something she gets to manage. We drove the rest of the way to my apartment in comfortable conversation, talking about books we'd both read, movies we wanted to see, memories of Frank that we'd never shared with each other before. When we pulled up in front of my building, Marcus helped me carry my small suitcase upstairs. He looked around my apartment with new eyes, taking in the cleanliness and order, the personal touches that made it home, the evidence of a life well lived if modestly. Mom, this is a nice place, thank you. I'm sorry I kept pushing you to leave it. You were worried about me. I understand. I was worried about the wrong things. What do you mean? I was worried about what might happen to you instead of paying attention to what is happening to you. And what's happening is that you're living independently, managing your health and finances, maintaining friendships and routines that make you happy. There's nothing wrong with your life that needs to be fixed. No, there isn't. I love you, Mom. I love you too, Mark. He hugged me then, and it felt like the hugs from my visit, genuine and warm and free from the underlying tension that had characterized our relationship for so long. After he left, I sat in my quiet apartment and reflected on the visit. It had been exhausting in some ways, but also clarifying. I could see now that changing my will had been just the first step in establishing new boundaries with Marcus and Jennifer. The conversation about senior living facilities had been another test, and I was glad I'd held my ground. I also realized that I needed to be more proactive about maintaining my independence and my relationships. It wasn't enough to simply refuse to be managed. I needed to demonstrate that I was thriving on my own terms. I called Elena that evening and told her about the visit. Mom, I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. It wasn't easy. Jennifer really had her heart set on solving the Deb problem. There is no Deb problem, there's a Jennifer problem. Now Elena, be fair, she's trying to protect her family. She's trying to eliminate anything that complicates her perfectly controlled life. There's a difference, maybe. But Marcus is learning to set boundaries, and that's what matters. How do you feel about everything now? Relieved, most. I feel like I've made my position clear, And now it's up to Marcus to decide what kind of relationship he wants to have with me. And if he decides he can't handle having a mother who won't be managed, then I'll know where I stand. And I can plan accordingly. Mom, you know I'll always be here for you. Right? Whatever happens with Marcus. You're not alone. I know, sweetheart. And that means more to me than you know. After I hung up with Elena, I made myself a cup of tea and sat down with the notebook where I'd been keeping track of my thoughts and decisions since the will change. I wrote about the visit, about the conversations with Marcus and Jennifer, about the clarity I'd gained regarding my own boundaries and expectations. Then I wrote about my plans for the future. Not the distant future that might involve illness or incapacity, but the immediate future that was mine to shape. I wanted to travel, even if just small trips within driving distance. I wanted to take a writing class at the community college. I wanted to volunteer somewhere that would use my skills and experience in meaningful ways. I wanted to cultivate friendships with people who saw me as Deb, not as someone's aging mother. Most of all, I wanted to live the remaining years of my life as the protagonist of my own story, not as a supporting character in someone else's idea of how my story should go. The next few months proved that I'd made the right choice in refusing to be managed. Marcus called me regularly, not to check up on me, but to actually talk with me. He invited me to dinner at their house twice, and both times the invitation came with the offer to pick me up so I wouldn't have to worry about driving at night. Jennifer was cordial during these visits, though not warm, but she seemed to have accepted that I wasn't going anywhere, and she'd stopped suggesting senior living facilities or other solutions to the inconvenience of my existence. More importantly, I started receiving invitations to family activities, a trip to the zoo with the grandchildren, a barbecue in their backyard, a school play where my grandson was performing. I didn't accept every invitation. Sometimes I genuinely couldn't afford the activity, and sometimes I didn't feel well enough to participate. But when I declined, I did so honestly, and Marcus accepted my decisions, without trying to solve the problems that made participation difficult for me. The shift in our relationship was subtle but significant. Instead of feeling like I was being managed, I felt like I was being included. Instead of feeling like a burden, I felt like a valued family member whose presence was actually wanted. It wasn't perfect. Jennifer still seemed to see me as an intrusion, and there were still moments when I could sense Marcus's anxiety about my independence. But overall, our interactions became more natural, more genuine, more like the relationship I'd always hoped we could have. 6 months after my visit to their house, I got a call from Marcus that surprised me. "Mom, can I ask you for advice about something?" "Of course. Jennifer's been talking about having another baby. She thinks it would be good for the kids to have a younger sibling. And what do you think?" "I think we're stretched pretty thin already, financially, emotionally, logistically, but Jennifer really wants another child, and I don't want to be the one who denies her that." "What does your gut tell you?" "My gut tells me that we should wait a few years, let the kids get older, get our finances more stable, maybe buy a bigger house, then trust your gut." "But what if I'm wrong? What if this is our last chance and we miss it?" "Marcus, there's no such thing as a perfect time to have a baby, but there are better times and worse times, and only you and Jennifer can decide which this is." "I know, it's just hard when she's so set on the idea. Can I ask you something?" "Sure. Are you asking me for advice, or are you asking me to validate a decision you've already made?" "I think I've already made the decision. I think I needed to hear someone else say that it's okay to trust my instincts." "It's okay to trust your instincts, Marcus. You're a thoughtful person and a good father. Your instincts are probably right." "Thanks, Mom. Can I ask you something now?" "Of course." The conversation about Jennifer wanting another baby revealed something I hadn't expected. Marcus was learning to trust his own judgment again, but he was also learning to value my perspective in a way he hadn't for years. When he asked why he'd called me instead of discussing it with friends or colleagues, his answer surprised both of us. "I called you because you're the only person who will give me honest advice without trying to influence the outcome for your own benefit." It was a simple statement, but it meant everything to me. After years of feeling like Marcus saw me as either a burden or an obligation, He was finally seeing me as a trusted advisor, someone whose wisdom came from love rather than agenda. That conversation marked another shift in our relationship. Marcus started calling me when he was wrestling with decisions, not just when he felt guilty about my well-being. He asked for my thoughts on job opportunities, parenting challenges, even minor household decisions. Nothing earth-shattering, but the kind of everyday consultation that happens between adults who respect each other's judgment. Jennifer, meanwhile, seemed to be struggling with the new dynamic. She'd grown accustomed to being Marcus's primary advisor, the person he turned to when he needed to talk through important decisions. Having me back in that role, even partially, clearly made her uncomfortable. The tension came to a head during Thanksgiving dinner at their house. I'd offered to bring something, and Jennifer had suggested a simple side dish, something that wouldn't require too much coordination with the rest of the meal. I'd made my grandmother's green bean casserole, the one that had been a family favorite for decades. When I arrived with the casserole, Jennifer looked at it with barely concealed dismay. "Oh, Deb, I already made green beans. I should have been more specific about what we needed." "That's okay," I said. "We can have two different preparations, or I can take mine back home." No, that's fine. We'll just have a lot of green beans." But throughout dinner she kept mentioning how much food we had, how hard it was to coordinate multiple dishes, how she should have made a more detailed plan. It was clear that my casserole represented something larger than a simple miscommunication about side dishes. After dinner, while Marcus was helping the children with a puzzle and I was wrapping leftovers, Jennifer approached me in the kitchen. "Deb, can we talk?" "Of course. I feel like things have been tense between us lately, and I'm not sure why." I continued wrapping leftovers, choosing my words carefully. "I'm not aware of any tension, Jennifer. Have I done something to upset you?" "It's not what you've done. Exactly. It's more about the dynamic that's developed between you and Marcus." "What dynamic is that?" "He calls you about everything now. Decisions. About work. About the kids. About our finances, things that he used to discuss with me." I set down the plastic wrap and turned to face her fully. "Jennifer, Marcus is an adult man who can choose who he wants to talk to about his concerns. If he's calling me more often, maybe it's because he finds our conversations helpful, but it affects our marriage when he's getting advice from someone outside our household about decisions that impact our family." "I'm not outside your family, Jennifer. I'm his mother. You know what I mean." "Actually, I don't. Can you be more specific?" She took a breath, clearly trying to organize her thoughts. "When Marcus calls you about whether we should have another baby, or whether he should take a new job, or how to handle discipline issues with the kids, he's bringing a third party into decisions that should be between husband and wife. Has Marcus ever told you that my advice influenced a decision he made against your wishes?" "No, but that's not the point." "What is the point?" "The point is that marriage is about two people making decisions together. When one person is constantly seeking outside input, it undermines the partnership." I could see her perspective, even if I didn't entirely agree with it. "Jennifer, do you and Marcus never talk to anyone else about your marriage or parenting decisions? Do you never call your sister or your best friend when you're struggling with something?" "That's different." "How?" "Because they're not trying to influence Marcus directly. Neither am I. When Marcus asks for my advice, I give him my honest thoughts and then remind him that he and you are the ones who have to live with whatever decision you make. But your honest thoughts come from a very specific perspective, which, the perspective of someone who thinks Marcus should prioritize your needs over his family's needs." The accusation hung in the air between us, and I felt my chest tighten with anger. But I also felt something else. Clarity. Jennifer's real issue wasn't that Marcus was seeking advice from me. Her real issue was that she feared my influence would interfere with her ability to shape their family's priorities. "Jennifer, can you give me an example of when I've encouraged Marcus to prioritize my needs over his family's needs?" "The whole situation with your will. For start, how did changing my will prioritize my needs over Marcus's family's needs?" "You used emotional manipulation to make him feel guilty about not helping you financially."
I changed my will because Marcus told me that my financial problems weren't his responsibility. I agreed with him and acted accordingly. But you did it to punish him. I did it to protect myself from spending the rest of my life wondering whether my son's kindness was genuine or just an investment in his inheritance. That's emotional manipulation. No, that's setting boundary. Emotional manipulation would have been threatening to change my will, unless he gave me money. Instead, I accepted his position and adjusted my expectations accordingly. Jennifer was quiet for a moment, and I could see her struggling with the logic of my response. Okay, maybe that's not the best example, but you have to admit that your relationship with Marcus affects our marriage. All family relationships affect marriage, Jennifer. Your relationship with your parents affects your marriage too. The question is whether those effects are healthy or unhealthy. I think it's unhealthy when Marcus feels guilty about setting boundaries with you. Then we agree on something. I think it's unhealthy too, which is why I've been encouraging him to set whatever boundaries he needs to set. But you've also been encouraging him to maintain a close relationship with you. I've been encouraging him to have whatever relationship with me feels authentic to him. If that's a close relationship, I'm grateful. If it's a distant relationship, I'll accept that too. Really, Jennifer, I'm not trying to compete with you for Marcus's attention or loyalty.
I'm trying to have an honest relationship with my adult son, whatever that looks like. But you have expectations. I have hopes, not expectations. I hope Marcus and I can maintain a loving relationship. I hope he'll include me in his family's life in whatever way feels comfortable for him. I hope he'll call me when he needs someone to talk to. But I don't expect any of those things, and I'm prepared to adjust my hopes based on what he actually wants. Jennifer leaned against the counter, looking tired. It's hard for me to trust that. Why? Because you've already proven that you'll take drastic action when you don't get what you want from Marcus. What drastic action? Changing your will, Jennifer. I changed my will after Marcus explicitly told me that my financial well-being wasn't his concern. How is accepting someone's stated position considered drastic action? Because you knew it would upset him. I knew it might upset him. Yes. But I also knew that leaving my inheritance to someone who had dismissed my needs was inconsistent with my values. So you were teaching him a lesson. I was protecting my own dignity. There's a difference? There's a huge difference. Teaching someone a lesson implies that you're trying to change their behavior. Protecting your dignity means you're accepting their behavior and responding accordingly. Jennifer was quiet for several minutes, processing this distinction. Finally, she said, I guess I'm afraid that if Marcus gets too close to you again, he'll start feeling guilty about our family's financial priorities. What do you mean? I mean that we spend a lot of money on things that aren't necessities. The kids' activities, vacations, eating out, home improvement. If Marcus starts thinking about your financial situation all the time, he might start feeling like we should be spending less on ourselves and more on helping you. And there it was, the core of Jennifer's anxiety. She wasn't afraid that I would manipulate Marcus. She was afraid that Marcus's natural guilt and generosity, if awakened, would interfere with their lifestyle. Jennifer, Marcus is an adult who can make his own decisions about how to balance his financial obligation. If he decides he wants to help me more than he currently does, that's his choice to make. But it affects our family's budget. Yes, it does. Just like your choice to spend money on piano lessons for the kids affects your family's budget. Adults make choices about their priorities all the time. Piano lessons aren't the same as supporting your mother-in-law. You're right, they're not. Piano lessons are a choice you make because you value your children's development. Helping me would be a choice Marcus makes because he values my well-being. Both are legitimate priorities, but we have our own financial goals, and you should pursue those goals, but you shouldn't assume that Marcus will automatically prioritize your goals over every other consideration. He's my husband, and I'm his mother. Both relationships matter. But marriage comes first. Does it? According to whom? Jennifer looked startled by the question. according to common sense, according to the way healthy families work. Jennifer, healthy families don't operate on rigid hierarchies where one relationship automatically trumps all others. Healthy families operate on love, communication, and mutual respect. But if Marcus has to choose between helping you and saving for our children's college funds, he should choose our children. I agree. And if Marcus has to choose between buying you a new car and helping me pay for medical expenses, he should make whatever choice feels right to him, based on the actual circumstances. But you think he should help you? I think Marcus should do whatever allows him to sleep peacefully at night. What if what allows him to sleep peacefully is spending money that I think should go toward our family's future? Then you and Marcus need to have a conversation about your financial priorities and find a compromise that works for both of you. But your needs will always be part of that conversation now. My needs are part of that conversation, whether Marcus is close to me or not. Jennifer, the difference is whether he considers my actual needs, or imaginary versions of my needs based on guilt and assumption. Jennifer rubbed her temples, looking overwhelmed. This is exactly what I was afraid of. What? That if Marcus started caring about your situation again, it would complicate our decision-making process. Jennifer, caring about people always complicates decision. That's the price of love. But I want to be able to make decisions about our family's finances without having to consider your situation. Then you married the wrong man. The words came out harsher than I'd intended, but they were true. Jennifer wanted a husband whose loyalty and resources were entirely focused on their nuclear family, with no consideration for outside obligations or relationships. That wasn't the man Marcus was, and it wasn't the man I'd raised him to be. That's not fair. Jennifer, what's not fair about it? You want Marcus to compartmentalize his life so that his obligations to you and the children exist in isolation from his obligations to anyone else. That's not realistic, and it's not healthy. I want Marcus to prioritize his immediate family. And he does. But prioritizing doesn't mean completely ignoring everyone else. It does when resources are limited. Resources are always limited. Jennifer, but there's a difference between being thoughtful about how you allocate resources and being completely unwilling to consider needs outside your immediate household. I'm not unwilling to consider needs outside our household. Aren't you? You've spent the last 2 years trying to convince Marcus that helping me is a threat to your family's well-being, because it is. How? What specifically has Marcus done to help me that has harmed your family? Jennifer was quiet, clearly struggling to come up with concrete examples. He drives you to medical appointments sometimes, when you're not available and Elena can't come. How has that harmed your family? It takes time away from family activities. Has Marcus ever canceled a family activity to drive me to a medical appointment? No, but what? But he might. So you're creating conflict based on something that hasn't happened and might never happen. I'm trying to protect our family's interests. From what? From Marcus occasionally helping his mother. From Marcus feeling so guilty about your situation that he starts making decisions based on guilt instead of logic. And you think the solution is to minimize his relationship with me so he won't feel guilty. I think the solution is for Marcus to understand that his primary obligation is to his wife and children. His primary obligation maybe, but not his only obligation. Jennifer was clearly frustrated with the direction of the conversation. Deb, I don't want to fight with you. I just want to understand how we can all coexist without constantly having to negotiate around your needs. Jennifer, you don't have to negotiate around my needs. Marcus can choose to help me or not help me based on his own values and priorities. You can express your preferences, but ultimately it's his decision to make. But his decisions affect our marriage. Yes, they do. Just like your decisions affect your marriage. That's how marriage works. But you're not part of our marriage. No, I'm not. But I am part of Marcus's life. And Marcus is part of your marriage. Jennifer leaned against the counter, looking defeated. I don't know how to be comfortable with this dynamic. What would make you more comfortable? Knowing that Marcus's help for you has clear limits. Knowing that our family's financial security won't be threatened by open-ended obligations to you. Those are reasonable concerns, Jennifer. Have you talked to Marcus about establishing clear parameters for how he helps me? No, because any conversation about limits makes me look like the evil daughter-in-law who doesn't want him to help his mother, or it makes you look like a responsible wife who wants to ensure your family's financial stability. You really think Marcus would be open to that conversation? I think Marcus would appreciate clarity about your expectations. As long as you approach it as a planning conversation rather than an ultimatum. What's the difference? Planning means you work together to figure out how to balance competing priorities. An ultimatum means you demand that he choose between priorities. Jennifer nodded slowly. I could probably do planning. And Jennifer, I want you to know that I don't expect Marcus to support me indefinitely or to sacrifice your family's security for my comfort. You don't? No. I expect Marcus to help me when I genuinely need help, and when he's able to provide that help without causing significant hardship to his own family. Beyond that, I expect to take care of myself. How do we define significant hardship? That's something you and Marcus need to decide together, based on your income, expenses, and financial goals. But what if our definition of significant hardship is different from your definition of genuine need? Then we'll deal with those situations as they arise, like adults. What if you think Marcus should help you with something that we think is beyond what we can afford? Then I'll accept Marcus's decision and find another solution. Really? Really? Jennifer? I managed for 3 years after Frank died without asking Marcus for anything significant. I can continue to manage my own life, but you did ask him for help with that electric bill. Yes, and when he said no, I paid the bill myself and moved on. But you also changed your will. I changed my will because I realized that Marcus and I had different understandings of our relationship. Not because he wouldn't give me money, but because of how he responded to my request for help. What was wrong with how he responded? He lectured me about budgeting instead of asking if I was okay. He made me feel like I was irresponsible instead of recognizing that I was struggling. He treated me like a burden instead of like his mother. Jennifer was quiet for a moment. I think I might have influenced that response. What do you mean? I think I had convinced Marcus that helping you too much would be enabling, and that he needed to encourage you to be more independent. Why did you think that? Because I was scared that if he started helping you regularly it would never end, that you'd become financially dependent on us. And now I'm realizing that there's a difference between helping someone occasionally and taking on unlimited financial responsibility for them. And I'm realizing that Marcus felt guilty about saying no to you, not because you manipulated him, but because saying no felt wrong to him. It probably did. So when I convinced him that helping you was bad for you, I was asking him to act against his own instincts. Possibly. Jennifer rubbed her face with her hands. I think I owe Marcus an apology. For what? For making him feel like caring about you was a threat to our marriage. That might be a good conversation to have. And I think I owe you an apology too. You don't owe me anything, Jennifer. I do. I've been treating you like an intrusion instead of like Marcus's mother. You've been protecting your family. I understand that impulse. But I've been protecting my family from something that wasn't actually a threat. What wasn't a threat? Your relationship with Mark, your occasional need for help, your place in our extended family. No, those things aren't threats. I think I was scared that if Marcus got close to you again, he'd start questioning our spending priorities or feeling guilty about our lifestyle. And now I think Marcus is capable of maintaining a relationship with you without completely reorganizing his life around your needs. He is. And I think you're capable of asking for help when you need it, without expecting unlimited support. Jennifer smiled for the first time in our conversation. I think I've been making this more complicated than it needs to be. Family relationships are complicated, but they don't have to be adversarial. I'd like to try to do better. I'd like that too. We were interrupted by Marcus coming into the kitchen with the children, who wanted to show me their completed puzzle. The conversation ended there, but something had shifted between Jennifer and me. Not friendship exactly, but understand. Over the next few weeks, I noticed changes in how Jennifer interacted with me. She included me in group text messages about family plans. She asked my opinion about gifts for the children. She even called me once to ask for my grandmother's green bean casserole recipe, admitting that several people at Thanksgiving had asked about it. More significantly, I could sense that she and Marcus were having different conversations about me. Instead of viewing my needs as threats to be managed, they seemed to be treating them as factors to be considered in their family planning. The shift became most apparent when Marcus called me in January with an unexpected offer. "Mom, Jennifer and I have been talking, and we'd like to propose something." "What's that?" "We'd like to set up a small monthly transfer to your account. Not a lot, maybe $200. But something predictable that would help with your basic expense." I was quiet for a moment, surprised by the offer. "Marcus, that's incredibly generous, but I don't want to create a burden for your family." "It wouldn't be a burden. We've looked at our budget, and it's something we can easily afford. More importantly, it would give us all peace of mind." "How so?" "You'd know that you have a little extra cushion each month for utilities or medical expenses, or whatever comes up. And we'd know that you're not struggling with basic necessities." "What does Jennifer think about this?" "It was actually her idea." That surprised me even more than the offer itself. "Really? Really?" "She said she realized that a small, predictable amount would actually be less stressful for our budget than worrying about larger, unexpected requests for help." "That's very thoughtful of her. So what do you think?" I thought about it carefully. The money would certainly be helpful, and it would eliminate some of the anxiety I felt about unexpected expenses. But I also didn't want to accept anything that might create resentment or unrealistic expectations. "Marcus, I appreciate the offer more than you know, but I want to make sure we're all clear about the boundaries." "What kind of boundaries?" "I want to make sure you and Jennifer understand that this is help, not an obligation. If your financial situation changes, or you decide you need that money for something else, I want you to feel free to change or stop the arrangement without guilt." "Mom, we're not going to change our minds about this. Your kids might need something expensive, or you might want to save for a bigger house, or Jennifer might want to go back to school. Life changes, and priorities change with it. So you don't want the help." "I want the help, but I also want the freedom to know that accepting it won't create guilt or obligation for any of us." "Okay, we can agree to that, and I want to be clear that this is the extent of the financial help I'll accept from you on a regular basis. If I have a medical emergency or some other major unexpected expense, I'll handle it through my insurance, my savings, or other resources." "What if you don't have other resources?" "Then I'll ask for help and you'll decide whether you're able to provide it based on your circumstances at the time." "That seems reasonable. And Marcus, I want you to know that this doesn't change anything about my will. I didn't expect it to." "Good. This is about you helping me because you want to, not because you're hoping to inherit something." "I understand. Then yes, I gratefully accept your offer." The monthly transfers started in February, and they made a significant difference in my day-to-day financial stress. But more importantly, they represented a new dynamic in our family relationships. Instead of help being a source of tension and negotiation, it had become a simple expression of care. Jennifer's attitude toward me continued to evolve over the following month. She started including me in planning for family events, asking my preferences, and accommodating my limitations without making me feel like an imposition. She also started sharing more about her own life, telling me about her work frustrations, and her concerns about the children in a way that felt like genuine conversation, rather than polite small talk. The breakthrough came during Easter dinner at their house. Jennifer had been stressed about coordinating the meal, managing the children's expectations about the Easter bunny, and dealing with her own mother's criticism about various family decisions. After dinner, while Marcus was outside with the kids and his mother-in-law, Jennifer and I were cleaning up in the kitchen. "Deb, can I ask you something?" "Of course. How did you handle it when Marcus was little and you felt like you were failing at everything?" The question caught me off guard. "What makes you think I felt like I was failing?" "Just the way you talk about those years. You always mention how hard it was, how many sacrifices you made. It sounds like it was really difficult." "It was difficult, but I'm not sure I felt like I was failing." "Overwhelmed, maybe. Tired, definitely, but not failing." "How did you avoid feeling like a failure?" "Jennifer, are you feeling like you're failing?" She stopped loading the dishwasher and leaned against the counter. "Sometimes, a lot of the time actually." "At what?" "At being a good mother, at being a good wife, at managing everything that needs to be managed." "What makes you feel like you're failing?" "The kids are constantly asking for things I can't give them. Marcus is stressed about work and I can't fix that. My mother is always criticizing my parenting choice. The house is never clean enough.
The meals are never creative enough. I'm never patient enough. Jennifer, those all sound like impossible standards. But other mothers seem to manage it all. Do they, or do they just hide their struggles better? Maybe both. I put down the dish towel I'd been holding and turned to face her fully. Jennifer, can I tell you something I learned when Marcus was young? What's that? The goal isn't to be perfect. The goal is to be good enough most of the time, and to forgive yourself for the times when you're not. That sounds like making excuses. No, it sounds like being human. But what if not being perfect means you're damaging your children? Are you damaging your children? I don't know. I lose my temper sometimes. I let them watch too much TV when I'm tired. I don't always have the energy to do creative activities with them. Jennifer, do your children know that you love them? Yes. Do they feel safe and secure in your home? I think so. Are you teaching them good values and helping them develop into kind, responsible people? I'm trying to. Then you're not failing. You're doing the hard work of raising children, and sometimes that work is messy and imperfect. But what if I mess them up? You won't, and even if you make mistakes, children are remarkably resilient. How do you know? Because I made plenty of mistakes raising Marcus and Elena, and they both turned out to be good people. What kind of mistakes? I worried too much about money, and probably passed some of that anxiety on to them. I worked so much that I missed some school events that were important to them. I was probably too strict about some things, and too lenient about others. But Marcus and Elena seem to have such good memories of their childhood. They remember the love, Jennifer. That's what children remember most clearly. Really? They remember feeling safe and valued and cared for. The specific mistakes you make along the way fade into the background. Jennifer was quiet for a moment, processing this. I think I put too much pressure on myself to be the kind of mother I see on social media. Social media shows highlight reels, not real life. I know that intellectually, but it's hard not to compare. Jennifer, let me ask you something. Do your children seem happy? Most of the time, yes. Do they come to you when they're hurt or scared? Yeah. Do they laugh and play and act like normal, healthy children? Yes. Then you're doing fine. But what about all the things I'm not doing? The crafts and educational activities, and perfect birthday parties. What about them? Don't children need those things? Children need love, security, consistency, and guidance. Everything else is extra, but I want to give them extra, and sometimes you will, and sometimes you won't. That's normal. Jennifer smiled for the first time in our conversation. You make it sound so simple. It's not simple, but it's not as complicated as we make it sometimes. Did you ever feel competitive with other mothers? All the time, but I eventually realized that comparing myself to other mothers was making me miserable, without making me a better parent. How did you I started focusing on what my children actually needed from me, instead of what I thought other people expected me to provide. What did they need? Mostly just my attention and affection, time spent together, conversations about their concerns, help with problems they couldn't solve alone. Those things don't cost money or require special skills. No, they don't. I think I've been making parenting harder than it needs to be. Most of us do. Jennifer finished loading the dishwasher and turned to face me. Deb, thank you for this conversation. Thank you for trusting me with your concerns. I realize I haven't been very welcoming to you. You were protecting your family. I understood that, but I was also jealous. Of what? Of how easy Marcus's relationship with you seemed. How he could call you and get advice without having to explain all the context or worry about being judged. Jennifer, you could have that kind of relationship with your own mother. No, I couldn't. My mother judges everything I do. Then maybe you could have that kind of relationship with me. Really? If you want to, I promise not to judge your parenting choices or give unsolicited advice. And if I need someone to talk to about things that are hard to discuss with Marcus, I'm a good listener. I think I'd like that. I'd like it too. That conversation marked the beginning of a genuine friendship between Jennifer and me. She started calling me occasionally, not about family logistics, but about her own concerns and questions. I started feeling like a welcomed member of their family, rather than a tolerated obligation. The change in Jennifer's attitude had a ripple effect on the whole family dynamic. Marcus seemed more relaxed, less caught between competing loyalties. The children became more affectionate with me, perhaps picking up on their mother's increased warmth.
Family gatherings became more natural and enjoyable. By summer, our relationships had stabilized into something that felt sustainable and authentic. Marcus and I talked regularly, but without the underlying tension that had characterized our conversations for years. Jennifer and I had developed our own relationship based on mutual respect and genuine caring. The children saw me as a regular part of their lives rather than an occasional visitor. Most importantly, I felt valued for who I was rather than managed for who they thought I should be. It had taken nearly 2 years from the time I changed my will. But we had finally found our way to the kind of family relationships I'd always hoped were possible. The true test came in August, when I had a minor medical emergency that required surgery. Nothing life-threatening, but serious enough to require a few days in the hospital and several weeks of recovery at home. Marcus and Jennifer immediately offered to have me stay with them during my recovery. But I declined. I preferred to recover in my own space, with my own routines. What I needed was help with practical things like grocery shopping, transportation to follow-up appointments, and assistance with household tasks that required lifting or stretching. Instead of taking over my care or insisting I accept their preferred solution, Marcus and Jennifer worked with me to create a plan that respected my preferences while ensuring I had the support I needed. They arranged to take turns checking on me daily, coordinated with Elena to cover the times when they couldn't be available, and hired a cleaning service to handle heavy housework during my recovery. It was exactly the kind of collaborative, respectful approach to helping that I'd always wanted. They cared for me without controlling me, supported me without infantilizing me, and included me in decisions about my own care. During one of Jennifer's visits, she brought the children to see me. As they were getting ready to leave, my granddaughter hugged me and said, "Grandma, I'm glad you're getting better. Mom says you're really brave." After they left, I sat in my quiet apartment and reflected on how much had changed since that first phone call about the electric bill. The relationships were stronger, the boundaries were clearer, and everyone seemed happier with the new dynamic. That evening, Marcus called to check on me. "How are you feeling, Mom?" "Much better. The pain is manageable, and I think I'm healing well." "Good. Is there anything you need for tomorrow?" "No, I think I'm all set. Elena's coming by in the morning, and Mrs. Chen offered to pick up any prescriptions I might need." "Okay, but call if anything changes." "I will. Mom, can I tell you something?" "Of course. I'm really proud of how you've handled all of this. The surgery, the recovery, everything. Thank you. And I'm grateful that you've let us help you without making it complicated." "It's not complicated, Marcus. It's just love." "Yeah, it is." After we hung up, I made myself a cup of tea and sat down with the photo album I'd been looking through earlier. Pictures of Marcus and Elena as children, of Frank and me in our younger days, of family gatherings and holidays and ordinary moments that had seemed insignificant at the time, but now felt precious. I thought about the will I'd changed almost 2 years ago, and the letter I'd written to Marcus about earning his inheritance through his actions, rather than expecting it as an entitlement. I thought about how that decision had forced all of us to examine our relationships and expectations. The inheritance was still going to Elena and the grandchildren's education funds, but now that decision felt less like a protection mechanism and more like a simple reflection of what made sense for our family. Marcus and Jennifer were financially stable and didn't need my money. Elena was still building her financial security and could benefit from the inheritance. The grandchildren would benefit from having their education costs covered. But more than that, I knew now that Marcus's love and care for me wasn't motivated by financial expectation. He'd proven that he would be there for me regardless of what I left him, and that knowledge was worth more than any amount of money could ever be. 2 months after my surgery, I received a phone call that would test everything we'd built together. It was Patricia Hernandez, my estate planning attorney, calling with news I hadn't expected. "Mrs. Moore, I hope you're feeling better after your surgery." "Much better, thank you, Patricia. What can I do for you?" "I'm calling because I've received some interesting correspondence regarding your estate. It seems your son Marcus has contacted our office requesting information about your will. My stomach dropped. What kind of information? He wanted to know if you'd made any recent changes, and whether he was still named as a beneficiary. I felt that familiar tightness in my chest, the same feeling I'd had when Marcus first dismissed my financial struggles. What did you tell him? I told him that I couldn't discuss the details of your will without your written consent, but that if he had questions about your estate planning, he should speak with you directly. Did he say why he was asked? He mentioned that there had been some family discussions about financial planning, and he wanted to make sure he understood the current status of your estate. After I hung up with Patricia, I sat in my kitchen staring at the phone. Why would Marcus suddenly be asking about my will? We'd been getting along so well. Our relationship had stabilized, and he'd never mentioned anything about inheritance or estate planning. I decided to call him directly rather than let my imagination run wild with possibilities. Marcus, it's Mom. Do you have a few minutes to talk? Of course. How are you feeling? Any issues with the healing? I'm fine. Thank you, but I got an interesting phone call today from Patricia Hernandez. Silence on the other end of the line. Marcus, yes, I'm here. I can explain about that. I'd appreciate an explanation. Can I come over? This is the kind of conversation we should have in person. Of course. Marcus arrived at my apartment an hour later, looking uncomfortable and carrying a manila folder. He sat down at my small kitchen table and placed the folder between us. Mom, before I explain why I called your attorney, I want you to know that this isn't about me wanting to inherit your money. Then what is it about? It's about Jennifer and me trying to plan for our own financial future, and realizing that we don't actually know what to expect when it comes to your estate. I felt a mixture of relief and confusion. What do you mean? I mean that when we're planning for things like the kids' college expenses, or our retirement savings, we don't know whether we should factor in any potential inheritance from you. Why would you factor that in? Because even though you changed your will, we don't know if you might change it back, and because we don't know what your current financial situation actually is, or whether you might need support from us that could affect our own financial plan. Marcus, you know I've told you that I don't expect financial support from you, beyond what you're already providing. I know what you've said, but things change. Healthcare costs increase, inflation affects fixed incomes, home repairs become necessary. We want to be prepared to help you if you need it, but we also need to plan for our own family's future. I could see his point, but I was still confused about why that required calling my attorney. So why didn't you just ask me about this direct? Marcus opened the folder and pulled out several sheets of paper. Because Jennifer and I have been doing some financial planning with an advisor, and he asked us some questions that we couldn't answer. What kind of questions about potential inheritances, questions about aging parents and future care costs, questions about how much we should be budgeting for family support obligations. And you couldn't answer those questions without knowing the details of my will. We could answer them, but not accurately. Mom, I know you've said you don't expect ongoing support, but what if you develop a serious illness that requires expensive treatment? What if your apartment becomes unaffordable? What if you need care that Social Security and Medicare don't cover? Then I'll handle those situations as they arise. But how? If you don't have significant assets to draw from, and if you're not expecting an inheritance to us, then the responsibility for your care falls back on Elena and me anyway. I was beginning to understand his concern. You're worried that even though I've told you not to plan on supporting me, circumstances might force you to support me anyway. Exactly, and if that happens, we want to be financially prepared for it. So you called my attorney to find out whether I have enough money to take care of myself. I called your attorney to find out what our actual responsibilities might be. I looked at the papers Marcus had spread on the table: financial planning worksheets, budget projections, college savings calculation. It was clear that he and Jennifer had been thinking seriously about their long-term financial obligations. Marcus, what would you like to know? I'd like to know whether you have enough resources to handle your own long-term care needs, or whether Elena and I need to plan for the possibility of supporting you financially. And if I tell you that you need to plan for supporting me, then we'll adjust our financial planning accordingly. And if I tell you that I have adequate resources to take care of myself, then we'll plan based on that assumption, but you'll also want to know what happens to those resources when I die. Marcus looked uncomfortable. It would be helpful to know, yes. Why? Because if you're leaving everything to Elena, then I'll plan for Elena to have more financial resources than I will. That affects decisions about things like college funds for the kids, retirement planning, even decisions about career changes or risks I might take professionally. I could see the logic in his thinking, even if it felt calculated. Marcus, are you asking me to tell you what's in my will so you can plan your financial life accordingly? I'm asking you to give me enough information that Jennifer and I can make informed decisions about our own financial future. What if I'm not comfortable sharing those details? Then we'll plan for the most conservative scenario, which is that we'll need to be prepared to support you financially, and that we won't inherit anything significant, and that would affect your family's financial planning. It would mean we'd need to save more aggressively, take fewer financial risks, and probably scale back some of our current spending. I thought about this for several minutes. Marcus wasn't asking about my will because he was greedy or entitled. He was asking because he was trying to be responsible about his own family's financial planning. But I also wasn't comfortable with the idea that my estate planning decisions should be dictated by my children's financial needs. Marcus, let me ask you something. If I told you that I have adequate resources to take care of myself for the rest of my life, but that I'm leaving everything to charity when I die, how would that affect your financial planning? It would mean that Elena and I shouldn't factor in any inheritance in our planning, but also that we probably wouldn't need to budget for supporting you. And if I told you that I don't have adequate resources for long-term care, but that I'm leaving everything to you and Elena, it would mean that we'd need to budget for potential support costs, but that we'd eventually recoup those costs through inheritance. And if I told you that I have adequate resources, then I'm leaving everything to you and Elena, it would mean that we could plan our financial lives based on our own resources, with the knowledge that there would eventually be some additional inheritance. So my estate planning decisions definitely affect your financial planning. Yes, they do. And you think you have a right to know those decisions so you can plan accordingly. Marcus was quiet for a moment. I think Elena and I have a right to enough information to make informed decisions about our own financial lives. But you don't think I have a right to make my estate planning decisions without considering their impact on your financial planning. I'm not asking you to change your decisions, I'm just asking you to share them. But if sharing them influences your behavior toward me, then they do affect my decisions. What do you mean? I mean that if you know you're inheriting my money, you might feel less obligated to help me when I need it. And if you know you're not inheriting my money, you might feel more resentful about helping me. Mom, I don't think my feelings about helping you would change based on inheritance expectations, wouldn't they? Marcus, be honest. If you knew you were getting nothing when I die, and I called you asking for help with a major expense, wouldn't part of you feel frustrated that you were spending your money on someone who wasn't leaving you anything? Marcus was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, I'd like to think it wouldn't matter, but maybe it would. And if you knew you were inheriting everything and I asked for help, wouldn't part of you rationalize the expense as an advance on your inheritance? Possibly. So my estate planning decisions would affect your emotional relationship with helping me, regardless of your conscious intentions. You're probably right. Then you can see why I might not want to share those details. Marcus gathered up his papers and put them back in the folder. So where does that leave us? Where would you like it to leave us? I'd like it to leave us with enough information that Jennifer and I can plan responsibly for our family's financial future. And I'd like it to leave us with a relationship that isn't complicated by inheritance expectation. Are those goals incompatible? I thought about his question carefully. Maybe not. What if I give you general information without specific details? What kind of general information? What if I tell you that I have adequate resources to handle my expected expenses for the rest of my life, including potential long-term care costs, but that you shouldn't factor any significant inheritance into your financial planning? That would actually be very helpful, even if it means you need to plan more conservatively than you might otherwise. Yes,
It's better to plan conservatively based on accurate information than to plan optimistically based on assumptions. And you won't ask me for more specific details. I won't. If you want to share more information, that's your choice. Okay, here's what I can tell you. I have enough resources to take care of myself, including potential healthcare costs and long-term care needs. You and Elena should not factor any inheritance from me into your financial plan. If I ever need support that exceeds my resources, I'll ask for help, and you can decide based on your circumstances whether you're able to provide it. That's all the information I need. Good. And Marcus, I want you to know that I understand why you needed to ask these questions. Financial planning is responsible, and you can't plan effectively without accurate information. Thank you for understanding. But I also want you to understand why I was uncomfortable with the question. Money has a way of complicating relationships, and I want to protect our relationship from those complications. I understand that too. One more thing, Marcus. What's that? The financial support you and Jennifer are providing me each month. I want you to know that I don't consider that an obligation or an entitlement. If your financial situation changes, or if you decide you need that money for something else, you can stop it without any explanation or guilt. Mom, we're not going to stop helping you. You might, and if you do, I want you to feel free to make that decision without worrying about my reaction. Why is that important to you? Because I want your help to be a gift freely given, not an obligation grudgingly fulfilled. Marcus smiled. It is a gift freely given. Good. Then we understand each other. After Marcus left, I called Patricia Hernandez to let her know that the family situation had been resolved and that she should continue to keep my will confidential, unless I gave specific written authorization to share information. Then I called Elena to let her know about the conversation with Marcus. Mom, how do you feel about Marcus asking those questions? Initially, I was upset. It felt like he was checking up on his inheritance prospect. But after talking with him, I understand that he was trying to be responsible about his family's financial planning. Do you think he was being honest about his motivations? I think he was being honest about his conscious motivation. Whether there were unconscious motivations related to inheritance expectations, I don't know. Are you comfortable with what you told him? Yes, I gave him enough information to plan responsibly without giving him specific details that might affect our relation. And you're still planning to leave everything to me and the kids' education funds? Yes, that decision was never about punishing Marcus or rewarding you. It was about what makes the most sense given everyone's financial situations and needs. Several weeks later, I received another call from Patricia Hernandez, but this time the news was positive. Mrs. Moore, I wanted to let you know that we've received a significant settlement from your husband's life insurance company. What kind of settlement? Do you remember that we filed a complaint about their denial of a portion of your husband's life insurance claim? Vaguely. That was so long ago and I'd given up on it. Well, the insurance commission finally ruled in your favor. They've determined that the company wrongfully denied part of your claim and they're required to pay the balance plus interest and penalties. How much money are we talking about? $47,000. I sat down hard in my kitchen chair. $47,000. Yeah, the check should arrive within the next few weeks. After I hung up with Patricia, I sat in my kitchen staring out the window. $47,000. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was enough to significantly improve my financial security, enough to handle any major home repairs or medical expenses that might arise, enough to ensure that I wouldn't need to ask my children for help with anything beyond normal family emergencies. The first person I called was Elena. Mom, that's wonderful news. What are you going to do with the money? I'm going to put most of it into a high-yield savings account as an emergency fund. Maybe use a small portion to update some of the furniture in my apartment. That sounds perfect. Are you going to tell Marcus about it? I hadn't thought about it. Why? Well, he did express concern about your long-term financial security. This might give him peace of mind. I spent several days considering whether to share the news about the insurance settlement with Marcus. Finally, I decided to tell him about the settlement, but to be clear about what it meant and what it didn't mean. Marcus, I have some good news to share with you. What's that? I received a settlement from your father's life insurance company. They finally paid the portion of his claim that they'd been denying. Mom, that's great. How much? $47,000. Wow. That must be a huge relief. It is. It means I have a real emergency fund now. Money I can use for unexpected expenses without having to ask anyone for help. That's wonderful. Marcus, I want to be clear about something though. What's that? This money improves my financial security, but it doesn't make me wealthy. $47,000 might sound like a lot, but it's not enough to pay for years of care if I develop a serious illness or disability. I understand, and I want you to know that receiving this money doesn't change anything about our relationship or about the help you and Jennifer provide each month. Why would it change anything? Because sometimes when people know you have money, they assume you don't need help anymore, even if the money isn't adequate to cover all potential expenses. Mom, we're not going to stop helping you because you received an insurance settlement. I hope not. But I wanted to be clear about my expectations, and I want to be clear about mine. The help we provide isn't based on whether you need it to survive. It's based on our desire to make your life a little easier and more comfortable. That means a lot to me, Marcus. You made our lives easier and more comfortable for years. It feels good to be able to do the same for you. The insurance settlement did improve my peace of mind significantly. I put most of the money into a high-yield savings account and used a small portion to replace my ancient couch and buy a new mattress. For the first time since Frank died, I felt financially secure, not just financially stable. The psychological effect was as important as the financial effect. I no longer worried about every unexpected expense. I no longer felt guilty about occasionally buying something I wanted, rather than just something I needed. I no longer felt like I was one emergency away from having to burden my children. That sense of security affected my relationships with Marcus and Elena in positive ways. I felt more confident about setting boundaries, because I wasn't dependent on their goodwill for my basic survival. I felt more generous in my interactions with them because I wasn't constantly calculating the cost of every social activity. Most importantly, I felt more like myself again. For the first time since Frank's death, I felt like a complete person rather than someone defined primarily by my limitations and needs. In December, Marcus and Jennifer invited me to spend Christmas week with them instead of just Christmas Day. The invitation came without any pressure or expectations, just a simple offer to be part of their family routine for a longer period. I accepted, and it turned out to be one of the best weeks I'd had in years. I helped with Christmas preparations, spent time with the grandchildren, and enjoyed long conversations with both Marcus and Jennifer about everything and nothing. On Christmas Eve, after the children had gone to bed, the three of us sat in their living room, drinking wine and talking about family traditions, holiday memories and plans for the new year. Mom, Marcus said, I want to thank you for something. What's that? For not giving up on our relationship when I was being stupid about money and priorities. You weren't being stupid, Marcus. You were being influenced by fear and stress. I was being stupid, Jennifer said, and I want to thank you too. For what? For being patient with me while I figured out that having a mother-in-law doesn't have to be a threat to my marriage. It doesn't, I agreed. In fact, it can be a benefit to your marriage if you let it. Because I love Marcus, and anyone who loves Marcus wants his marriage to be strong and happy. I want you and Marcus to have a good relationship, because his happiness matters to me. I never thought about it that way, Jennifer. I'm not competing with you for Marcus's love. I already have his love as his mother. You have his love as his wife. They're different kinds of love, and they can coexist without conflict. I think I was afraid that if Marcus got close to you again, he'd start questioning our decisions or feeling guilty about our lifestyle. And now I realize that Marcus is capable of loving both of us, without being torn between us. He is, and he's also capable of making decisions that honor both relationships, without sacrificing either one. Marcus smiled. It's nice to be talked about like I'm a grown-up. You are a grown-up, I said. It just took me a while to start treating you like one, and it took me a while to start acting like one. We all learned something from this experience. What did you learn, Mom? Jennifer asked. I learned that love doesn't have to mean control. I can love Marcus and want the best for him without trying to manage his choices or manipulate his priorities. And what did I learn? Marcus asked. You tell me. I learned that loving someone means considering their well-being in your decisions, but it doesn't mean sacrificing your own family's well-being for theirs. And Jennifer, I learned that family relationships can be additive, rather than competitive. Having a good relationship with you doesn't take anything away from my relationship with Marcus. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the lights on their Christmas tree, and enjoying the peaceful end to a complicated year. Mom, Marcus said, eventually, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Are you happy with how things turned out? What do you mean? I mean with our family, with your financial situation, with your life in general. I thought about his question carefully. Yes, this isn't the life I planned when your father and I were young, but it's a good life. I have relationships with people I love, financial security that allows me to live with dignity, health that permits me to enjoy my daily activities, and a sense of purpose that comes from building something meaningful with my family. Do you ever regret changing your will? No. Changing my will forced all of us to examine our relationships and expectations. It created the conditions for us to build something better. Do you ever think about changing it back? I looked at Marcus, this man who had grown so much over the past 2 years, and felt a wave of love and pride. I think about it sometimes, but right now, I'm comfortable with my current estate plan. Because you don't think I need the money, because I think everyone's needs are being met appropriately, and because I think our relationships are based on love, rather than inheritance expectation. And if that changes, I'll reconsider my decisions. Fair enough. On Christmas morning, I watched Marcus and Jennifer with their children, seeing the easy affection and comfortable routines of a family that had found its rhythm. I watched them include me naturally in their celebrations, making space for my traditions alongside their own. I thought about the gift I'd given them by changing my will, though it wasn't a gift I'd intended at the time. By removing inheritance expectations from our relationships, I'd freed all of us to love each other without calculation or resentment. Marcus could help me, because he wanted to, not because he felt obligated or because he was protecting his inheritance. Jennifer could welcome me into their family, because she genuinely enjoyed my company, not because she felt she had to tolerate me for Marcus's sake. I could ask for help when I needed it, without worrying about the impact on future inheritance decisions. The relationships we'd built were cleaner, more honest, and more sustainable than what we'd had before. We'd learned to love each other without keeping score, to help each other without creating debt, and to set boundaries without creating walls. As I watched my grandson carefully arrange his new toys and my granddaughter read aloud from her new book, I felt grateful for the family we'd become, and optimistic about the family we would continue to be. The money I would eventually leave behind would help Elena build security for her family, and ensure that all the grandchildren could pursue their educational dreams. But the relationships I'd rebuilt would last longer and mean more than any financial inheritance could ever provide. I had given my family the gift of authentic love, and they had given me the same gift in return. It was the best possible outcome of what had started as the worst conversation of my adult life. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up, just click and check them out.